r/TrueOffMyChest My wife's affair partner tried to scam my deployment pay. Hashtag chunk 1, the call that changed everything. I was sitting in a concrete barracks in Al Udeid Air Base, sweat pooling under my body armor despite the AC unit working overtime, when my phone buzzed with a notification I'll never forget. A text from my bank: alert, unauthorized withdrawal of $3,500 from your checking account. My hands went cold. Not because of the money, though $3,500 was real money, but because I knew, with absolute certainty, that I hadn't authorized anything. I was stationed 6,000 miles away in Qatar. My wife, Jennifer, had access to our joint account back home in North Carolina. But we had an agreement. A clear, explicit agreement made before I deployed 6 months ago. That agreement was being violated. I stared at the text for what felt like an hour but was probably 15 seconds. My mind started racing through possibilities, each one more unsettling than the last. Jennifer wasn't stupid with money. We'd been married for 4 years. We'd built something solid, or so I thought. We had a budget spreadsheet. We paid our bills on time. She knew that my combat pay was sacred. That was for our future. That was for the house we wanted. That was for the kids we talked about having when I got back. My buddy Martinez was lying on the cot across from mine, reading some Tom Clancy novel he'd had since week 2 of deployment. He looked up at me. "You good, Sarge? You look like you just got bad news." "Yeah," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "Yeah, I think I did." I immediately opened the banking app and logged in. What I saw made my stomach drop completely out of my body. It wasn't just one $3,500 withdrawal. There were 3 of them. Over the last 6 weeks. $10,500. Just gone. From the account where I'd been depositing my deployment pay, the hazard pay, the combat pay, the stuff that made being stuck in the desert for half a year almost bearable financially. I called Jennifer immediately. It was 3 a.m. in North Carolina, but I didn't care. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone to my ear. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice groggy but alert in that way that told me she'd been sleeping hard, genuinely confused about being woken up. "What? What's wrong? Is something wrong? Are you okay? Jennifer, why is there $15,000 missing from our checking account?" The silence on the other end of the line stretched out like taffy. I could hear her breathing change. Faster now. Guilty now. What? No. I mean, that's not, how much? $15,000. In 3 separate withdrawals over the last 6 weeks. Explain that to me. Another pause. I could practically hear the wheels turning, the mental scramble for an excuse, for a lie that might stick. "Babe, I can explain. It's an investment opportunity. A really good one. Someone here told me about it, and the returns are supposed to be incredible. Like, we could double our money in 6 months. I was going to tell you, but I wanted to have proof of concept first, An investment opportunity," I repeated, my voice flat. "Jennifer. That's our money. That's my money. My hazard pay. I'm in a combat zone. I put that money there because I was trusting you to keep it safe, and you just, what? Gave it to someone. It's not like that. This guy knows what he's doing. He has a whole portfolio, An." "What guy?" The question came out louder than I intended. Martinez looked over at me with genuine concern now. I stood up and walked out of the barracks, into the thick Qatar night air. "His name is David. David Kellerman. He works in the sports medicine field, he's really smart, and he's helped a lot of people invest their money." "How did you meet him?" She didn't answer immediately. In that non-answer, I knew. I knew the way you know something is wrong the moment you see it, even before you have all the details. "We met through a mutual friend, An." "Are you fucking him?" Another silence. Then, "No. No, why would you even?" "Jennifer. I'm not an idiot." "How did you meet him?" "At the gym. Sarah from yoga introduced us. He was helping her with some fitness stuff, and then he mentioned he did investment consulting on the side, and I just thought, you know, with you gone, we should think about our future, An." I hung up. I literally just ended the call. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone into the dirt. I stood there in the darkness of Al Udeid, listening to the distant sound of planes and the drone of the massive air conditioning units that kept the base functioning, and I felt something shift inside me. Not break. Shift. Like a fundamental realignment of how I understood my life. My wife had given our money to a stranger. Specifically, to a man she'd met at the gym. And there was something in her voice, something in those hesitations and non-answers, that told me this wasn't just about money. My phone buzzed again. A text from Jennifer: "Please don't be mad. I can explain everything. It's not what you think." I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my mobile banking app again and looked at those 3 withdrawals. Each one had a note in the transaction history. Kellerman Investments LLC, account transfer. On impulse, I googled the name. Kellerman Investments. Nothing. No business registration. No website. No legitimacy whatsoever. Just my wife, apparently, handing $15,000 to a con artist she'd met at the gym. That's when I knew I had to go home. Not just to save my marriage, that ship had probably already sailed, though I was too angry and confused to see it clearly yet. But because every instinct I developed in 8 years of military service, including 2 years of intelligence training, told me that this wasn't an isolated incident. My wife wasn't the smartest mark out there. But she was also not stupid. If she'd fallen for this, how many other military wives in our town had fallen for it too? And more importantly, what the hell was I going to do about it? Hashtag chunk 2, the paper trail. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the barracks common area with my laptop, opening every financial database I could access through the military network, cross-referencing everything I could find about David Kellerman and Kellerman Investments LLC. Nothing. No business licenses in North Carolina. No tax filings. No LLC registration with the Secretary of State. A Google search turned up a few scattered results. A David Kellerman who was a physical therapist in Raleigh, different guy, wrong age. A David Kellerman who'd been arrested for DUI in 2019, promising, and a bunch of LinkedIn profiles for people with that name who had no connection to investments. But here's what I did find, a Facebook profile. David Kellerman, 34, lived in Fayetteville, North Carolina, the same town where Fort Liberty, formerly Fort Bragg, is located. His profile picture showed a tan, attractive guy with the kind of easy smile that probably worked on people who weren't trained to look for predatory behavior patterns. He had about 800 friends, a mix of military wives, some gym selfies, and vacation photos that screamed, "Look how successful I am." The profile was sparse on actual details. No listed employer. No education history. No job title. Just entrepreneur and fitness enthusiast. Red flags the size of parade grounds. I screenshot everything before I could talk myself out of it. The profile picture. His friend list. I recognized some of the names from the Fort Liberty community Facebook groups. The photos. All of it. Then I did something I probably shouldn't have done. I opened a private browser window and searched deeper. I used some of the resource access I still had from my intelligence training days, nothing classified, nothing that would get me in trouble, just publicly available databases. Background check sites. Court records. Property records. David Kellerman had never owned property. He had no business licenses. But he did have a history, 2 civil lawsuits filed against him in the past 3 years. Both by women. Both settled out of court, which meant the details weren't public, but the cases existed. And in one of them, the plaintiff's last name was Donnelly. Jennifer's maiden name is Donnelly. That's not a coincidence. I was spiraling now. It was 4 a.m. on base, the middle of the night back home, and I was starting to piece together a picture I didn't want to see. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just my wife being foolish with our finances. This was deliberate. This was practiced. This was a pattern. I opened my email and started composing a message to my command. Then I stopped. I deleted it. Going through the chain of command right now would trigger a whole series of protocols, family emergency leave, which would be approved, but it would also flag the situation with personnel, and the last thing I needed was this becoming official military gossip before I even got home. Instead, I called my mother. It was 4:30 a.m. She answered on the second ring, which told me she'd been awake, or had never gone to sleep. "Honey. Is everything okay? Are you hurt?" "No, Mom. I'm not hurt. But I need a favor, and I need you to not ask too many questions right now. Tell me." I explained, in clipped sentences, what I'd found. I didn't tell her about the affair, I couldn't quite say that out loud yet. Instead, I framed it as financial fraud. Because that's what it was, fundamentally. The affair was personal. The fraud was the crime. "I need you to go to our house tomorrow. Jennifer will probably still be sleeping when you get there. I need you to look at her car registration, her phone bill statements if they're lying around, anything that shows her interactions with someone named David Kellerman. Don't confront her. Just look. And then I need you to call me back. Sweetheart, what is going on? Just do it, Mom. Please. I'll explain when I can." She did it. My mother is the kind of woman who doesn't ask questions when her son is in crisis mode. She got up, drove to our house, and while Jennifer slept, she photographed Jennifer's car insurance documents, found credit card statements in a kitchen drawer, and took photos of the transaction history visible on our joint account statement that was sitting on the kitchen counter. Then she carefully put everything back exactly where she found it and called me. "There's a gym membership. It's charged to your credit card every month. Platinum Fitness, $240 a month. And honey, I looked at the credit card statement, and there's charges to restaurants, a hotel in Charlotte. This goes back almost 8 months. Since right before you deployed. 8 months. Since before I left. Meaning Jennifer had been seeing this guy, or at least been in contact with him, before I'd even shipped out. Did you recognize any of the restaurant names? The ones with David's name on them or anything? There's one called the Meridian. It's fancy, from what I can see online. Very expensive. And honey, there's a charge for flowers from a florist. $1,700. $1,700 worth of flowers. $1,700. For flowers. For a man who was stealing my money. Mom, I need you to do one more thing. I need you to check Jennifer's car. Look under the seat, the glove compartment, anywhere. Look for anything with his name on it. A business card. A note. Anything. This is serious, isn't it? Yes. She went to the garage. I heard her opening doors, rustling through things. And then. Oh my God. What? There's a box. Under the passenger seat. Honey, it's hotel receipts. Dozens of them. And there's a handwritten note. It says, she paused, and I could hear her voice tightening. It says, for the woman who makes every day an adventure. DK. The rage that hit me at that moment was clean and sharp. It cut through the confusion and the shock and the betrayal, and it crystallized into something I could actually use. Mom, I need you to put everything back. Don't touch anything else. Don't tell Jennifer you were there. And I need you to book me a flight home. Emergency leave. Make it for tomorrow. I don't care how much it costs. Sweetheart. I'm coming home, Mom. And when I get there, I'm going to find out exactly how deep this goes. But first, I need to talk to some people. I hung up and immediately pulled up the contact information for Captain Maria Santos from the Criminal Investigation Division at Fort Liberty. We'd done some cross-training together a few years back. She'd recognize my name. More importantly, she'd understand the gravity of what I was about to tell her. By the time I called her, the sun was coming up over the Qatar desert, and I'd already decided that David Kellerman had no idea what kind of attention he'd just brought upon himself. #Chunk3, the call. Captain Santos called me back within 30 minutes. That alone told me she took this seriously. Sergeant Mitchell. I got your voicemail. You said this was urgent. Yes, ma'am. I need to report a fraud case, but I need to do it carefully. There are ongoing complications. I heard the sound of a door closing on her end. Talk to me. I laid it out methodically, the way I'd been trained. The unauthorized account access. The $15,000 withdrawal. The lack of business licensing. The pattern of similar activity targeting other military wives. The civil lawsuits. I didn't mention the affair initially, I kept it professional, kept it about the crime. This needs to go through proper channels, she said when I finished. You understand that, right? CID will want to interview you, get a full statement, and will need to involve the finance office to trace the transactions in. I understand, ma'am. But here's the complication. My wife is involved. She's the one who gave him access to the account. I don't think she knew what she was doing, I think she was manipulated, but I need to figure out how much of this was knowing complicity before I file an official report. There was a long pause. How involved? Santos asked carefully. As in, she's been having a personal relationship with him. A romantic one. More silence. I could practically hear her recalculating the entire situation in her head. Okay. That does complicate things. For a lot of reasons. She sighed. Where are you right now? Still deployed. But I've got emergency leave approval pending. I should be home by tomorrow evening. Don't file any official reports until we've talked face to face, Santos said. I'm going to pull some quiet background on this David Kellerman character through our channels. If he's running this scam on multiple military families, we might already have flags on him somewhere. And Mitchell. Be careful how you handle this when you get home. I know this is personal, but if your wife is going to cooperate with an investigation, and we might need her to, you can't do anything that compromises her status as a witness or makes her defensive. I understand, ma'am. Do you? Because what I'm hearing between the lines is that you're angry, and I get that, but anger can make you do stupid things that torpedo a prosecution. She was right. I knew she was right. But knowing something and feeling it are two completely different things. I got home at 7:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. The flight had been delayed out of Charlotte, and I'd spent 5 hours in the air watching clouds and my own thoughts, cycling between rage and something darker and more complicated, a kind of numb dread about what I was actually going to find when I walked through that front door. My mother was waiting in her car in our driveway when I pulled up. She got out and wrapped me in a hug that lasted longer than normal, and I realized she was crying. Your wife is inside, she said quietly. She doesn't know you're home yet. I told her you'd called me earlier about needing something shipped to you, and I came over to help you pack. She believed it. Okay. Honey, before you go in there, my mother grabbed my arm. I need you to know something. I found more things. After we talked yesterday, I couldn't stop thinking about it, so I went back to the house while she was at her yoga class, and I found. Mom, no. Stop. You need to let me handle this now. The less you're involved, the better it is for everyone. But. I'm serious. Go home. Don't come back here until I call you. And don't tell Jennifer you've been helping me. If this goes legal, if there's any investigation, the last thing we need is her thinking you were spying on her. My mother's face fell, but she nodded. She hugged me again and left. I sat in my truck for 15 minutes before I went inside. I checked my phone. A message from Captain Santos, .cid briefed. Kellerman's name came up in another complaint 3 months ago that was dropped. We're on it. See you tomorrow at 1000 hours. Then I went into my house. Jennifer was in the kitchen, making dinner. She turned when she heard me come in, and for a split second, her face was blank, and then it transformed into shock, then joy, then something else, something complex and guilty that flickered across her features so fast I almost missed it. Oh my God. What are you doing home? I set my duffel bag down very carefully. Emergency leave, I said flatly. We need to talk. About what? Is everything okay? Are you okay? No. I'm not okay. And we both know why. Her face went pale. She set down the wooden spoon she'd been holding. What are you talking about? I'm talking about David Kellerman. I'm talking about the $15,000 that's missing from our account. I'm talking about the fact that you gave him access to my military banking information and my deployment pay, and I'm talking about the fact that he's running this same scam on at least 3 other military wives in this town. She tried to speak. Her mouth opened and closed and nothing came out. I also know about the hotel rooms in Charlotte. I know about the flowers. I know about the gym membership and the restaurants and the fact that this has been going on for 8 months. You don't understand, she said finally, and her voice was small and thin. Then explain it to me. Explain to me how my wife, the woman I trusted with everything while I was overseas serving my country, decided to commit fraud with some con artist and destroy our marriage. I didn't, he said it was an investment. He said. I don't care what he said. I care about what you did. I walked past her into the living room and sat down. My hands were shaking. I pressed them together between my knees, trying to steady myself. Here's what's going to happen, I said. Tomorrow morning, I'm meeting with CID. I'm filing a formal complaint. And you're going to cooperate fully with the investigation, because if you don't, you're going to be charged as an accessory to fraud. Do you understand me? Are you going to have me arrested? I don't know yet. That depends on what CID finds and what the prosecutor decides. But I know what I found, Jennifer. I know what you did. She sat down on the opposite end of the couch, and we didn't speak again for the rest of the night. #Chunk4, the interview. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room until 3 a.m., watching Jennifer through the kitchen doorway as she moved around the space like a ghost, washing dishes that didn't need washing, straightening items that were already straight. At one point, she tried to approach me, and I held up my hand. There was nothing left to say. Nothing that would matter anyway. By the time dawn broke over our quiet suburban street, I'd made a list. Not of what I knew, I already knew everything, but of what I needed to find out. What CID didn't know. What Santos hadn't mentioned in her brief message. The scope of the operation. The money trail. Whether David Kellerman was working alone or if he had partners. Whether Jennifer had known from the beginning or if she'd been manipulated as thoroughly as I wanted to believe. The last part was the hardest to contemplate. At 9:45 a.m., I showered and changed into my class A uniform. It felt like armor. Jennifer watched me from the bedroom doorway as I buttoned my blouse, and I could feel her eyes on me, searching for something, forgiveness, maybe, or mercy. I wasn't offering either. I'm not going to make any deals, she said quietly. I met her gaze in the mirror. That's not your decision to make. You're going to destroy him. Yes. Even if it destroys me too. I fastened my belt with deliberate slowness. You did that yourself. Fort Liberty's Criminal Investigation Division headquarters was in a brick building near the main gate, and I'd walked past it hundreds of times without ever really paying attention to it. Now it seemed enormous, institutional, final. Captain Santos was waiting for me in a conference room with two other investigators, one male, one female, both with the flat, observant expression of people who'd spent years listening to lies and figuring out which ones mattered. Santos introduced them as Special Agent Morrison and Special Agent Chen. We sat around a gray table with a recorder between us, and I went through everything again. The account access. The withdrawals. The timeline. The hotel charges I'd found in the credit card statements. The pattern of similar complaints. I laid it all out like pieces of a puzzle, methodical and complete. Your wife, Chen said, making notes. Has she admitted to giving Kellerman access to the military account? Not explicitly. But she hasn't denied it either. We'll need to interview her separately, Morrison said. Her statement will be crucial. If he coerced her into giving him access, that changes how we approach this. If she knew what he was doing, if she understood the account was military specific and that accessing it was fraud, that's a different situation entirely. She's smart, I heard myself say. She knew. Santos glanced at me, and I saw the warning in her eyes. The one she'd given me over the phone about anger and compromise. We're going to need you to walk us through your discovery process, Chen continued. How you access the account information while deployed. How you obtain the hotel records, the credit card statements. We need to make sure everything is admissible. This was the part I'd been waiting for, and dreading. My mother accessed some of it when I called her, I said carefully. With my permission. She's the registered user on the secondary account, so technically she had legal access to view the transactions. But I told her to stop. After that, I did the rest through my own account access. Morrison and Chen exchanged a look. Not a good one. Your mother did what now? Morrison asked. She looked at the account statements. She was trying to help me understand the scope of what was happening. It was one afternoon, and I shut it down immediately once I realized what she was doing. We're going to have to interview her as well, Santos said, and there was sympathy in her voice but also steel. And she may have inadvertently compromised some of the evidence chain. Anything she accessed or found needs to be documented separately. I felt something drop in my chest. She didn't break any laws. She had legitimate access to her own account. Technically correct, Chen said. But if Kellerman's legal defense argues that evidence was planted or tampered with, we need to be able to prove every step of the investigation. Who touched what, when, and under what authority? Right now, we have a civilian with access to financial information who is investigating her son's case. A defense attorney will have fun with that. So what does that mean? I asked. It means we'll work around it, Morrison said. But it means we move faster now. We need to lock down the official investigation before anything else gets compromised. We're going to need to interview Kellerman within the next 48 hours. Once we do that, he'll probably lawyer up, and everything gets harder. Santos leaned forward. Mitchell, I know this is personal. I know you want to take this slowly and protect your wife and process what's happened. But that's not how this works anymore. Once we open this officially, it moves fast. It gets public. It gets messy. I understand. Do you? Because your wife is going to face potential charges. Your mother is going to be interviewed. Your personal financial information, your service record, your marriage, all of it becomes part of a federal investigation. And if Kellerman has lawyers, they're going to use everything they can to discredit you, to argue that this is a jealous serviceman trying to punish a con artist who slept with his wife. I don't care what they argue. It's the truth. The truth is complicated, Chen said. The truth is that your wife, according to preliminary findings, moved $15,000 from an account she had legitimate access to. The truth is that she gave another person her credentials. The truth is that relationship consent gets murky when money is involved. The truth is that we have to prove knowledge and intent, and that's harder than it sounds. I felt something twist in my stomach. Are you saying she might not face charges? I'm saying that depends on what she says, what evidence we find, and what the prosecutor decides, Morrison said. Right now, she's a potential witness. She could also be a co-conspirator. Those are very different things, and the line between them is going to be determined by evidence and interviews, not by your feelings about what happened. Santos stood up. We're going to move forward with the investigation. I want you to go home. Don't contact David Kellerman. Don't tell anyone, and I mean anyone, including your wife, what we've discussed here. And Mitchell. Don't do anything else that compromises this case. No matter how angry you are. Yes, ma'am, I said. But as I left that building, I already knew I wasn't going to be able to follow that order. Chunk 5, the unraveling. The drive home felt longer than it should have. My hands gripped the steering wheel at 10 and 2, the way they taught us in basic training, and I forced myself to breathe slowly. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. The same technique I'd used before convoys in hostile territory, before moments when everything could go wrong. Except everything had already gone wrong. It had been going wrong for months while I was 6,000 miles away thinking my wife was safe, thinking my home was stable, thinking the only danger I faced was in a theater of actual combat. My phone buzzed 3 times before I even pulled out of the base parking lot. All Jennifer. Where are you? Mitchell, please respond. I'm scared. I ignored them all. Santos's voice was still in my head, asterisk don't do anything that compromises this case asterisk, but what she didn't understand was that the case was already compromised. Not by my mother's account access, though that was bad enough. It was compromised by the fundamental fact that I wanted Jennifer to hurt the way I was hurting, and that want was going to push me toward actions that would make everything worse. By the time I got home, it was just past noon. Jennifer's car was in the driveway, which meant she wasn't at work. That was new. Maybe she'd called in. Maybe she'd already started falling apart. She was waiting in the kitchen when I walked in, still in her bathrobe even though it was midday. Her eyes were red and puffy, her hair unwashed. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of what she'd done. They called me, she said before I could even close the door. The army called. They said I need to come in for an interview tomorrow morning. I set my keys on the counter with deliberate care. Good. Mitchell, I need you to listen to me. I need you to understand what happened with David before I have to explain it to them. I don't want to hear it. You have to. Because if you don't understand, you're going to let them think things that aren't true, and I'll lose everything. I turned to face her. You already lost everything. You lost your marriage. You lost my trust. You lost the right to ask me for anything ever again. Her face crumpled. I didn't know. At first, I didn't know what he was doing with the account access. He said it was just for setting up the investment. He said it was standard procedure, that lots of military families did it. And you believed him? Yes, I believed him. Her voice broke. He was charming and he was paying attention to me and you were gone and I was lonely and stupid and... Don't make this about my deployment. I felt something cold move into my chest, pushing out the anger and replacing it with something worse, contempt. Don't stand there and tell me that this is my fault because I was doing my job. That's not what I'm saying. Isn't it? You had a choice, Jennifer. Every single time you let him access that account. Every time you didn't ask questions about what he was doing with the money. Every time you got into bed with him knowing that something was wrong. You chose. She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. I was going to tell you. I was going to tell you when you got back. When was that? After he'd drained the account? After he'd moved on to the next military wife? How many families has he done this to, Jennifer? She didn't answer. Captain Santos said they're looking at multiple victims. Multiple cases. This isn't a one-time mistake. This is a pattern. This is him targeting women like you, married to deployed soldiers, lonely, isolated, and using them to steal from military families. I know. She wrapped her arms around herself. I know that now. Did you know it then? The silence that followed was answer enough. I walked past her, up the stairs to our bedroom. I needed distance. I needed to think clearly, and every moment I spent in the same room as her was pulling me towards something I couldn't control. Santos had warned me about this. Morrison and Chen had warned me about this. The anger was useful until it wasn't, and then it became a liability, something that would get the case thrown out, something that would let David Kellerman walk away free to target the next woman, the next family. I lay on the bed, our bed, except it wasn't ours anymore, and stared at the ceiling. My phone was in my pocket, vibrating occasionally with messages I wasn't reading. Mom. My team sergeant. A text from Jake Martinez asking if I was okay. No one was okay. No one was going to be okay for a very long time. Around 5 p.m., my landline rang. I let the machine get it, but when I heard the voice, I sat up. Mitchell, this is David Kellerman. I just want to say that I think there's been a serious misunderstanding, and I'd really like the opportunity to explain what happened with the account. I have documentation that shows. I picked up the phone. Don't call this number again. Wait, listen, I think if you just let me explain. I hung up. The call felt like a violation. Like he'd reached into my home and touched something sacred. I stood in the hallway outside our bedroom, hands shaking, and made a decision that I knew was going to complicate everything. I needed to talk to him. Not officially, not with CID present. Not in any way that Santos would approve of. But I needed to understand how he thought. How he justified what he was doing. Whether he even felt anything for Jennifer or if she'd always just been a mark, a means to an end. I also needed him to know that I knew. That no matter what his lawyers did, no matter what tricks he had up his sleeve, I was going to be the one who destroyed him. My father had been a Marine. He taught me that some things couldn't be done by the book, that sometimes you had to work outside the system to protect what mattered. He'd also taught me that those choices had consequences, and you had to be willing to live with them. I pulled out my personal laptop and started researching David Kellerman in a way that Santos specifically told me not to. I found his Facebook profile, he'd been dumb enough not to make it private, and started mapping his connections. His work history. His previous addresses. Any pattern that might show how many times he'd done this before. By 9 p.m., I had 8 possible victims identified. 8 women whose husbands were or had been deployed. 8 financial irregularities that could be connected to a man with a conviction for fraud in 2018 that apparently hadn't stopped him from trying again. And I had his address. Santos had said not to compromise the case. She'd said not to do anything that would give his lawyers ammunition. She'd been right about all of it. But she also didn't understand what it felt like to have your life dismantled while you were halfway around the world trying to keep people alive. She didn't understand the specific kind of rage that came with that particular betrayal. I was going to need to do something about that rage, one way or another. And doing nothing wasn't an option I could live with. #Chunk6. I sat in my car 3 houses down from David Kellerman's address, watching the single-story ranch house with the overgrown lawn and the dented mailbox. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Wednesday. The street was quiet except for the occasional car passing through, and I'd been parked here for 2 hours, telling myself I was just gathering information, just observing, just being thorough. That was a lie. I had his address because I'd spent the last 8 hours digging through public records and social media like someone obsessed, which I was. I had a file folder on my laptop with screenshots of his Facebook interactions, his work history at 3 different companies over 5 years, and a pattern of movement that suggested he'd been doing this for longer than anyone realized. But that wasn't why I was sitting in the dark outside his house at midnight. My phone buzzed. Another message from Jennifer, please come home. We need to talk about tomorrow, Tomorrow. Her interview with CID. She was terrified, which was appropriate. She should be terrified. She'd committed wire fraud. She'd given unauthorized access to a military account. She'd enabled a theft that was being investigated as a federal crime. I didn't respond. A light came on inside Kellerman's house, a bathroom light visible through a high window. I watched it for 30 seconds, then it went off. He was home. He was normal enough to use the bathroom before bed while my entire life was collapsing. While Jennifer sat in our kitchen in her bathrobe, terrified. While my mother was probably pacing her house wondering what was happening to her son. My hands were tight on the steering wheel. This was stupid. This was exactly what Santos had warned me against, and I was doing it anyway because the anger had metastasized into something that needed feeding. It needed action. It needed consequences to flow downhill from Kellerman's front door, and I was the only person willing to make that happen. My phone rang. 1:13 a.m. It was Martinez. What the hell are you doing? His voice was tight, controlled in that way that meant he was trying not to lose it. I'm getting information. You're sitting outside a suspect's house at 1 in the morning. That's not getting information. That's surveillance. That's intimidation. That's 100 different things that are going to blow back on you and everyone connected to this case. How did you know where I am? Because I have Find My Friends on with you, you idiot. We all do. Chen saw the ping 20 minutes ago and called me. Where are you exactly? I didn't answer. Mitchell, listen to me. Whatever you're thinking about doing right now, don't. I know you're angry. I know you want to confront him. I know you want him to know that you know. But that's exactly what his lawyers want you to do. They want you to do something stupid so they can argue that the entire investigation is tainted by personal vendetta. Maybe it is. Then don't let it be. Don't give him that. Don't let what he did to your family also destroy the case against him. Because that's what's going to happen if you go knock on his door right now. I was quiet for so long that Martinez thought the line had gone dead. I need you to start driving, he said quietly. Right now. Start driving away from that address. Tell me when you're moving. The engine was already on. I'd started it 10 minutes ago without realizing I'd made the decision. I pulled away from the curb, watching Kellerman's dark house recede in my rearview mirror. I'm moving, I said. Where are you going? Away. Not good enough. Specifically. The base. The barracks. I can't go back to the house yet. I heard Martinez exhale slowly. Okay. That's good. That's smart. I'm coming to meet you. You don't have to. I'm coming. Give me 20 minutes. He hung up before I could argue. The drive to base felt longer than it should have, every red light an interrogation, every empty street a reminder of how alone I was in this. By the time I pulled into the barracks parking lot, I felt hollowed out, the anger still there but tamped down now, compressed into something denser and more dangerous. Martinez was waiting by the entrance, still in civilian clothes even though it was past 1 a.m. He didn't look angry exactly, but there was something in his face that suggested a reckoning coming. Walk with me, he said. We went up to my room on the 2nd floor. I hadn't been back since the emergency leave paperwork went through. It felt like a foreign space now, evidence of a life I used to have. My dress uniform hanging in the closet. Books on the shelf. A photo of me and Jennifer from our wedding on the nightstand, which I immediately turned face down. Talk to me, Martinez said. There's nothing to talk about. Bullshit. You're sitting outside a suspect's house in the middle of the night like you're planning something. That's not nothing. That's something very specific, and I need to know what it is so I can help you talk yourself out of it. I sat on the edge of the bed. I just needed to see where he lived. I needed to know where he was. That's not a crime. It's not a crime, but it's stupid. It's the kind of stupid that gives his lawyer ammunition to argue entrapment or harassment. It's the kind of stupid that could get this whole case thrown out. Martinez pulled up a chair and sat across from me. And more importantly, it's the kind of stupid that means you're not thinking straight. I'm thinking perfectly straight. I'm thinking that while I was deployed, that man was stealing from me. While I was thinking about my wife, she was in bed with him. While I was doing my job, they were planning how to access my account and take my money. And now he's going to have some expensive lawyer who'll find technicalities and loopholes, and maybe, maybe, he spends 6 months in federal prison before getting out on appeal. So what? You go confront him. You tell him what you know. You threaten him. I didn't respond. That's what I thought. Mitchell, I get it. I do. But you're a soldier first. This is a military investigation now. There are people whose job it is to handle this. Let them do their job. And if they don't, if he walks, then he walks. And it sucks. And you live with it. But you don't throw away your career, your commission, your future because of something some asshole did. My phone buzzed. Another text from Jennifer, I'm scared. I can't sleep, Your wife needs you, Martinez said, looking at my phone. My wife destroyed everything. Yeah, and she's going to live with that for the rest of her life. But you sitting outside some guy's house at midnight isn't going to make that better. It's only going to make things worse for everyone. He stood up. Come on. You're going to stay here tonight. Tomorrow, you're going to come with me to talk to Santos about everything you found. You're going to turn over that research. You're going to let the system work. And if the system fails, then you're going to learn to live with that disappointment like everyone else in this country does. I knew he was right. I hated that he was right. Okay, I said quietly. But we both knew I wasn't done yet. Hashtag chunk 7. The meeting with Santos happened at 0900 hours in a sterile conference room on the third floor of the CID building. Martinez sat to my left. Santos sat across from me with a digital recorder between us and a file folder that was considerably thinner than I'd expected. There was a JAG officer present, a captain named Webb who kept his expression carefully neutral and his pen moving across a legal pad. Walk me through your investigation, Santos said, not looking up from the folder. I prepared for this. I had my laptop set up, organized folders, a timeline that started with Jennifer's first text mentioning Kellerman's name and extended through the present day. I talked about the pattern I'd identified, 3 companies in 5 years, each one ending under vague circumstances. I showed the screenshots of his social media, the financial records Jennifer had provided, the accounts he'd accessed and a timeline of withdrawals. Santos listened without interrupting. When I finished, he closed the folder and sat back. This is good work, he said. Thorough. But I need to be clear about something. He looked directly at me now, and I felt something shift in the room. This investigation is being handled by federal authorities. The FBI specifically. They're looking at wire fraud, identity theft, and potentially organized fraud, because preliminary investigation suggests Kellerman has been running this scheme on at least 7 military families in the region. Possibly more. 7. I felt Martinez tense next to me. 7 that we know of. The amounts range from $3,000 to $25,000. All of it accessed through military family members, all of it moved through the same shell accounts. We're talking about a federal case with potential conspiracy charges, money laundering, and interstate fraud. So he's going to federal prison, I said. That depends entirely on how clean this investigation stays, Captain Webb interjected. His voice was measured, deliberately calm. Sergeant Mitchell, I need to ask you directly, have you had any contact with the subject, Marcus Kellerman, since you became aware of his involvement? I thought about the car outside his house. The light coming on in the bathroom. My hands on the steering wheel at 1 in the morning. No, I said. Martinez's jaw tightened. He knew it was a lie. Or at least, he knew it was technically true because I hadn't spoken to Kellerman, but I'd been there. I'd been watching. That was a distinction that felt important at the time and meaningless now. Have you told anyone about your investigation? Santos asked. Just Martinez and Chen. And my wife, before I understood what was happening. Not anyone else. Not any of the other families. Not anyone in your unit. No. Santos nodded slowly. Here's the problem, Sergeant. The FBI is going to want to talk to you. They're going to want your investigation. They're going to want access to everything you've compiled. And they're going to want to know every single thing you've done since you discovered the theft. Okay. It's not okay if there's anything you're not telling me. Because if federal investigators find out you've been conducting your own surveillance, building your own case, looking for your own angle of justice, that becomes a problem for the prosecution. It becomes discovery. It becomes a defense argument about bias and entrapment and investigation integrity. I didn't say anything. Is there anything? Captain Webb asked. No, I said. Another lie. Or another technical truth. I'd sat outside his house but hadn't done anything. I'd watched but hadn't acted. The distinction was getting very thin. We're going to need you to provide all of this, Santos said, gesturing at my laptop. And we're going to need you to step back. Completely. No more investigating. No more research. No more trying to find patterns or connections. From this moment on, you are a witness and a victim. You're not an investigator. Understood? Understood. I mean it, Mitchell. The FBI is very serious about this. They've already got federal prosecutors involved. They're building a case that spans multiple states. Your cooperation is valuable, but only if you haven't contaminated the investigation by trying to play detective. I understand. The meeting lasted another 30 minutes. They asked me detailed questions about my relationship with Jennifer, about when I'd first suspected something was wrong, about the timeline of deployments and communications. They asked about Kellerman's relationship with Jennifer and whether I'd ever met him, whether I'd ever had direct contact. No, I said. Not since I was home on leave. Not since I found out. After it was over, Captain Webb pulled me aside in the hallway. I know this is difficult, he said quietly. But I need you to listen to what I'm saying. The government is going to pursue this case aggressively. There's a lot of money involved, and there's political pressure to protect military families from fraud. That means Kellerman is probably going to prison. But it also means that if you do anything, that suggests bias or personal vendetta, his lawyer is going to exploit that. It doesn't matter how guilty he is. It matters how the case looks. I understand. I don't think you do. I think you're angry, which is justified, and I think you're planning something, which would be a mistake. So I'm going to tell you this as your JAG officer. If you do anything that compromises this case, you're going to be liable for damages. The case gets thrown out, Kellerman walks, and you could potentially be facing civil suit. Your wife could be liable. Your family could be liable. Do you understand what I'm saying? I understood exactly what he was saying. Yes, sir. Good. Then you're going to go home. You're going to help your wife prepare for her interview with CID. You're going to cooperate fully with federal investigators. And you're going to let the system do what it's designed to do. Yes, sir. He paused, studying my face. You're not going to do any of those things, are you? I haven't decided yet. At least that was honest. Martinez drove me back to the house. We didn't talk much. When we got there, Jennifer's car was in the driveway. The house looked smaller somehow, like shame had shrunk it. The grass needed cutting. The mailbox was overflowing. Talk to your wife, Martinez said. And then what? And then you decide whether you're going to be the man who destroys this case trying to get revenge, or the man who lets justice work. I got out of the car without responding. Inside, Jennifer was in the kitchen, still in her bathrobe, and I realized that Santos and Webb were right, she needed me. Not my anger. Not my surveillance. Not my midnight stakeouts. But that didn't mean I was going to stop. It just meant I was going to be smarter about it. Hashtag Chunk 8. The FBI agents showed up at 0630 on a Tuesday morning. There were 3 of them, 2 men and a woman in dark suits, credentials already displayed before I'd finished my coffee. Jennifer was still asleep. I didn't wake her. They took me to the same CID conference room, but this time the setup was different. A laptop was open with files already loaded. Special Agent Morrison led the questioning, and he was polite in a way that made it clear he knew I was holding something back. Walk me through everything, he said. And I mean everything, Sergeant Mitchell. Not just what you think is relevant. I didn't plan to tell him about the stakeouts. I didn't plan to tell him about the hours I'd spent outside Kellerman's apartment, documenting his comings and goings, photographing the cars that came and went, building a profile of his associates. But Morrison was good. He asked specific questions that suggested they already knew some of it. When he asked about my laptop activity, specifically about the searches I conducted on Kellerman's associates, I realized he'd already subpoenaed my internet records. The lie became pointless. I watched him, I admitted. For about 2 weeks after I found out. I documented his activities, his contacts, patterns of behavior. Morrison didn't look surprised. Did you confront him? No. Did you threaten him? No. Did you access any of his accounts, property, or personal information without authorization? No. Everything I documented was from public vantage points. He nodded slowly, making notes. That's actually helpful. And it doesn't necessarily compromise anything if you didn't obtain information illegally. The surveillance itself, assuming it was from public property, is admissible. He paused. Captain Webb was concerned you might do something more aggressive. I thought about it, I said. It was the most honest thing I'd said in weeks. But you didn't. No. Morrison closed his laptop. I want to show you something. He pulled out a thick folder and slid photographs across the table. They were surveillance photos of Kellerman, professional ones, taken by actual investigators with actual equipment. They showed him meeting with other people, accessing storage units, transferring items. The photographs spanned months, and they were meticulous. We've been watching him since February, Morrison said. Before you even came home on emergency leave. We had a tip from a banking officer who noticed the pattern of fraud. We were already building the case. Your investigation didn't compromise anything because we were 3 steps ahead of you the entire time. I felt something release in my chest, a knot of tension I'd been carrying for so long I'd stopped noticing it was there. We've connected him to 12 military families, Morrison continued. The amounts total $93,000. We've also connected him to 3 civilian families he ran a different scam on, cryptocurrency investments. That brings the total to approximately $127,000. We have wire transfers, communications, and testimony from 7 witnesses. 2 of the families turned over recordings he made without his consent. Is he going to prison? That's for a court to decide, but yes. The case is strong. Federal prosecutors are confident. The only question is how many years. Morrison leaned back. Your cooperation is valuable because you're a credible witness with military background. But I want you to understand something. What you did, the surveillance, the stakeouts, that wouldn't have helped us. In fact, if he'd been aware of it, if he'd seen you watching, he might have accelerated his timeline and disappeared. We've seen it before. So I could have made it worse. You could have. But you didn't. And that's why I'm telling you this instead of reading you your rights. The trial happened 8 months later. I testified for 2 hours. I answered Morrison's questions about the timeline, about what I discovered, about Jennifer's involvement. Kellerman's lawyer tried to paint me as a vengeful husband whose testimony was biased, but Morrison had already established his own investigation timeline, which undermined the personal vendetta narrative. Kellerman was convicted on 5 counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. The judge sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison. As they led him out of the courtroom, he looked directly at me. Not with hatred. With something worse, recognition. He'd understood, finally, that he'd miscalculated. He'd thought he was playing a game with a deployed soldier whose wife was lonely. He hadn't understood that soldiers learn to think in patterns, to see through deception, to wait and observe before acting. I thought about telling him that I'd almost done something worse. That I'd had moments, in the early morning hours outside his apartment, where I'd thought about things that would have destroyed everything, my career, my freedom, the case against him. But I'd stopped myself each time. Not because I'm noble. Because Martinez was right. Because Webb was right. Because the system, however frustrating, was designed to handle men like Kellerman better than I could. Jennifer and I never reconciled. The divorce was finalized quietly, without drama. She moved back to her mother's house in Ohio. I don't know if she acknowledged what she'd done, or if she still thinks of herself as a victim of Kellerman's manipulation. I've chosen not to care. I re-enlisted for 4 more years. I'm working in intelligence now, training analysts on fraud detection and pattern recognition. My commander seems to think my extracurricular investigation shows initiative and tactical thinking. I don't correct him. Sometimes I think about what might have happened if I'd taken a different path. If I'd confronted Kellerman in that apartment, if I'd let rage make the decisions. I'd probably be facing charges instead of a promotion. The case against him might have fallen apart. 11 other families might never have received the justice they deserved. The money, my $15,000, was recovered about 6 months after Kellerman's conviction. It was part of the restitution judgment, though I know it'll take years for him to actually pay it back, if he ever does. I don't care about the money anymore. I cared about it when I was deployed, when it represented months of sacrifice. But now it's just a number. What I care about is knowing that I didn't let anger make me into something worse. That I let the system work, despite how much I hated it. That I became the man Captain Webb hoped I'd become instead of the man I might have been. Kellerman's in federal prison in West Virginia now, serving his time. He'll be released when he's 51 years old. I'll be living my life, probably promoted again by then, probably with a new relationship that's built on something healthier than betrayal and wartime desperation. And that's enough.